Okay, good evening, everybody. First of all, thanks for all the good wishes. Yes, I'm feeling much better now. The cold or flu, whatever it was, has more or less gone. But if my voice gets scratchy a little bit later on, you'll understand why. And I'll try and keep it maybe a little bit shorter tonight. We'll see. In any event, so far so good. So, this evening's class talked about the... Hi, Frank. Okay. This evening's class talked about the channels opening from below and the windows of heaven opening from above. Now, what is that all about? Sounds very mystical. Actually, it is based on a verse. It's based on a verse in Genesis. And it is really talking about, it's in this week's Torah reading. In this week's Torah reading is the section of Noach, Parshas Noach. And it speaks there about the flood, obviously. And here, in this particular verse, we're speaking about essentially the beginning of the flood. And this is actually what it says. These are the verses. It says like this. This is chapter 7, verse 11 of Genesis, verse 11 following. It says like this: B'shnat shesh ma'ot shana l'chaya Noach, in the 600th year of the life of Noah. B'chodesh hasheni, in the second month. That's now the second month is the month of Cheshvan. Some other opinions say that it's Iyar, the month of Iyar, that the first month is Nisan, but I think we go according to the general, before the Torah was given, we go according to the general principle that before the Torah was given, the year began in Tishrei, with the creation, the first month. So the second month would be Cheshvan. B'shiva asar yom lachodesh, on the 17th of the month. Bayom hazeh nivka'u kol ma'ayonot tohom. On this day, all the springs, all the wells of the vast deep were burst through. Tohom Rabbah, of the vast deep underneath the ground. You could say all the fountains of the deep burst forth. V'arubot hashamayim niftachu, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rains began. Now, we're not going to talk so much about the flood. What we are going to talk about is the Zohar's commentary on that. This is what the Zohar says. I'll quote the Zohar and then I'll translate into English. The Zohar quoting this verse where it says the 600th year of Noach. Noah, in Noah's 600th year, in the 600th year of his life. So the Zohar says as follows. It says that B'shit ma'ashna ashnin, in the 600th year, the Shishisa'ah of the 6th millennium, in the 600th year of the 6th millennium. Now we're in the 6th millennium now, but we're in the 777th year. So 177 years before our time, which takes us into more or less the mid-1800s. Let's go back to the 1800s, the 19th century. Let's say from the beginning of the 19th century. This is what the Zohar is talking about in... the Zohar obviously was written way beforehand, but it's predicting what's going to happen in the 1800s, which is the 600th year of the 6th millennium. It says like this: Yiftechun tar'ei de chochmasa. The gates of wisdom will be opened. The gates of the wisdom above, the chochmasa ila'ah, the supernal wisdom, umabui, and the wells or the springs or the fountains, the chokhmah latata, of wisdom down below. Vayistaken alma, and the world will become prepared, will become how do you say, rectified and prepared, la'ala b'shvi'ah, to go into the seventh millennium, Just like kabarnash, just like human beings, just like us, timistakam b'yom shisha, just like we prepare on the sixth day of the week, michi erev shimsha, from when it starts to get dark, in other words, in the afternoon of the sixth day, the afternoon of Friday, in other words, la'ala b'shabbata, to go into the Sabbath. Uf hachinami, and so too it will be over here. And then it goes on to quote the verse that we just quoted from Noah. So basically, what is the Zohar saying? The Zohar is saying that in a certain period of time, from let's say the mid 1800s or from the 1800s, the 19th century onwards, the gates of wisdom will be opened. Now, what do we mean over here? We do know that there were a tremendous amount of scientific discoveries that actually began more than ever in the 1800s. I actually had up here on a list. I don't know if I still have it, but I had. Wait a second. Let me see here. Just 1 second, folks. Let me see if I can find here what I was looking for before. Scientific discoveries. If you look up scientific discoveries of the 19th century, right? Great scientific discoveries of the 19th century. So there's a timeline. And let me just read you some of the scientific discoveries of the 19th century. Let's just get down to the 19th century. Here we go. Okay, so there's teleological evolution, Lamarck. There's atomic theory in chemistry. There is electromagnetism was discovered. In other words, the relationship between electricity and magnetism. They started to observe the properties of semiconductors. Idealized heat engine, Ohm's law in electricity, Avogadro's law, which is to do with gas, non-Euclidean geometry, electromagnetic induction, that's Faraday, discovery that all plants are made of cells, stellar parallax to star 61 Cygni. The Doppler effect, first law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy, discovery of Neptune, absolute zero in 1848. Theory of evolution, well, that wasn't a great, germ discovery, theory of magnetism, the laws of inheritance, genetics, entropy, periodic table, thermionic emission, photoconductivity, cathode rays, the phase rule, which is chemical thermodynamics, entropy, piezoelectricity, liquid crystals, virus, discovered the virus, discovery of X-ray, radioactivity, and we didn't even get to that. And then the quantum theory, the Planck's law of black body radiation, the basis of quantum theory, that was in 1900. So from that time on, you can see how things started to develop towards modern science. So there are some that explain, there are some commentaries who explain that the well springs that opened up, the fountains that opened up below, were the fountains of secular wisdom. There are those that explain it that way. So again, we said that the windows of heaven open up, and the fountains of the great deep open up, and that all pour forth their water, which again the Zohar interprets as a sudden influx of wisdom, from the higher wisdom and the lower wisdom, and some interpret the lower wisdom as knowledge, as scientific knowledge. I'll speak about that a little bit later. Now, there are other people who interpret this as the chokhmah of Torah, the wisdom of Torah, which is the higher wisdom, and the wisdom of Maaseh Bereshit, which is the lower wisdom, the wisdom of creation. Both of them are the wisdom of God. But one is sort of inner dimensional wisdom, and one is an external outer dimension, the outer dimension wisdom. The outer dimension wisdom would be the wisdom of creation, in other words, the chokhmah, which on which Maaseh Bereshit, the creation, is based. And the other chokhmah is the chokhmah of Torah, the understanding of God. The understanding of God, God's mind, so to speak, understanding God's mind. So there's understanding God's actions, which would be Maaseh Bereshit, and there's understanding God's mind, or his intentions, to put it even more clearly. That would be Chokhmah Ilah, or the higher wisdom. Both of these open up in the time of in the time of the 600th year of the 6th millennium. That's when the opening began, and then comes the flood of knowledge. And the flood of knowledge, essentially, according to the way that we're explaining it now, this is the wisdom of the essence of God, which is the higher wisdom, and the wisdom of His creation, which is the lower wisdom. Both of these are actually revealed in the inner dimension of Torah. They're both revealed in the inner dimension of Torah. In other words, in Kabbalah, and particularly in the teachings of the Hasidic masters. The Baal Shem Tov lived from 1798, I believe, 1698 to 1760. 1698 to 1760. So he passed away in the middle of the 18th century, and it was after that the wisdom began to multiply and spread. This is all according to the Zohar, in order to prepare the world for the future, for the 7th millennium. Now, what is the 7th millennium all about? What happens in the 7th millennium? So, in the 7th millennium, the sages all agree, and this is brought down and explained in Maimonides and the Rambam, that in that time, everybody will know God, and it says like this, Kulam Yedu Osi, everybody will know me, because the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God like water covers the seabed. Like water covers the seabed. In other words, it'll be so filled with knowledge, everything will be so filled with knowledge, exactly. Isaiah. Everything will be so filled, and human beings will be so filled with knowledge that it'll be like water covering the sea. In other words, knowledge will fill up all of our existence. But this knowledge, again, takes upon two forms. There are two forms of knowledge. And the truth is that Hasidic teachings in particular, Kabbalah in general, and Hasidic teachings in particular, or some branches of Hasidic teachings, explain that really these two wisdoms are not essentially two wisdoms, two different things. They're two sides of the same coin. They're two sides of the same coin, so to speak. So that the wisdom of the essence of divinity, the wisdom, the essence of God, the higher wisdom, the supernal wisdom, the Chokhmah Ila'ah, the higher Chokhmah, that will be understood just like the lower Chokhmah is understood. And indeed, one will be an expression of the other. Now, let me delve into this a little bit further. The wisdom of creation is essentially the wisdom of how the worlds came into being. how existence, reality came into being, and how it continues to run and to subsist and to thrive and so on and so forth. But that whole reality of how the world came into being, which is called Chokhmah D'Maaseh Bereshit, the Chokhmah of the work of creation, that wisdom of the work of creation is essentially the wisdom of Kabbalah as presented to us in the teachings of the Zohar and in the writings of the Arizal, in terms of the development of the worlds. As we know, Kabbalah speaks about several planes of existence. There isn't only one plane of existence, the physical plane of existence, and beyond that, spirituality. The Zohar, and particularly in the writings of the Arizal, speak about 5 different planes of reality, which we discussed in these classes before. I'll just mention them briefly. The lowest plane of reality, the plane of reality which appears to be the physical world around us, which really exists. It's not that it doesn't exist, it exists. The Torah itself states God created, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created. So there is a creation. There's no question about it that there is a creation. The only thing is that the creation that we see is not all that there is to the creation. We only tend to see the outer surface of creation and not the inner dimensions thereof. What Kabbalah does for us, it explains the inner workings of how the world, the physical world, came into being. Now, the physical world is the lowest component of the first world, called the world of Asiyah. That's the lowest world. The world of Asiyah, the world of action, so to speak. It's also the world of change. That's the lowest world, the world of Asiyah. The physical world and the spiritual laws which govern the physical world. It's the world of Asiyah. A higher plane of reality, a higher plane of existence, which coexists with the first plane. It's not in a different place, it coexists. They coexist, everything is all in the same place, because we see places sort of, if a thing is here, it can't be there as well. And if there's something here, another thing cannot occupy the same space. That is true. But that's only true in physicality. That's not true in spirituality. In the spiritual worlds, that is not the case. There are 5 dimensions of being, all in the same place at the same time. So there's the physical world and the spiritual underpinnings of it, which is called the world of Asiyah. Then there's the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, which is a higher plane of reality. It's a plane of reality which doesn't just look at the outer dimension of things, but also the inner structure. The inner structure, primarily in Kabbalistic terms, the 6 midot, the 6 emotional attributes. The 6 emotional attributes, or the 6 days of creation, as they're called, the 6 days of creation, or as we refer to it most often, the world of Yetzirah, what is revealed primarily, although we have all the Sfirot, all the divine emanations in the world of Yetzirah, as we have in the world of Asiyah. In the world of Asiyah, the primary Sfirah is the lowest of the Sfirot, Malchut, the Sfirah of Malchut. In the world of Yetzirah, the primary manifestation of those is the cluster of Sfirot called Ze'er Anpin. Ze'er Anpin is the 6 Sfirot, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Those 6 are the world, primarily what illuminates the world of Yetzirah. A higher plane of reality yet, called the world of Bria, is illuminated primarily by the Sfira of Bina. Bina meaning understanding. So understanding, it's an intellectual world in a sense. It's the world of intellect. It's the world of concepts rather than emotions. It's a conceptual world. The world of Bria is the world of concepts. Bria is dominated primarily by the Sfira of Bina. And then you get to Atzilut, and the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, is dominated by the Sfira of Chokhmah. the illumination of the world of Atzilut is through the Sphira of Chokhmah. Therefore, Atzilut, the world of Atzilut, is a world which is existentially nullified. It's existential nullification. The word Chokhmah can be broken into two words, Koach and Ma. The ability to be undefined and to merge into nothingness. To merge into nothingness. That's the world of Atzilut. It's a world which is dominated by Chokhmah and therefore very, very difficult to describe and to delineate. It's relative to the world of Bria, it's an infinite world. And then there's the world of highest plane of existence, is the world of Adam Kadmon, which is dominated by Keter, by the Sphira called Keter. The primary Sphira to illuminate the world of Adam Kadmon is Keter. But all of these worlds exist all at the same time. The wisdom that describes all of these worlds and how one world developed from the other, from highest to lowest, in fact, from the world of Adam Kadmon to Atzilut, from Atzilut to Bria, from Bria to Yetzirah, from Yetzirah to Asiyah, and to our final physical world. So the science of that, so to speak, is the wisdom which is called Chokhmah de Ma'aseh Bereshit, the Chokhmah, the wisdom of creation, the wisdom of the creation, of bringing into being this entire, not the entire universe, but the entire universes, or the multiverses, I suppose you could call them, of Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut, Adam Kadmon. But these are all focusing on a sort of a developmental aspect, the creation of something out of nothing, out of nothingness. When we say nothing, it's not meant in the sense that we would probably use the word nothing. It is something, but it's such a different something from everything else that it's called nothing. We can't describe it. We don't know what it is. It's impossible to describe. So that something that the creation that emerges out of nothingness emerges out of something that we can't describe, and that's why we call it nothing. It's not that it's not there. It's there, but it's not describable. It's such a higher level of being that we don't know how to describe it. We don't have the terminology to be able to explain it. In any event, that emerging of something from nothing and the emergence of all the worlds, which are the something, from the nothing that precedes them, that's all the chokhmah of Ma'aseh Bereshit, of creation. But that's only the lower chokhmah. The higher chokhmah is the chokhmah of the essence of God's mind. In other words, the chokhmah of Torah. And chokhmah primarily of the inner dimension of Torah, of the inner teachings of Torah. So it says in the Zohar again that in the 1800s, in the 600 year of the 6th millennium, which is the beginning of the 1800s more or less, and onwards, these two sources of wisdom begin to open up. The wisdom of understanding God's creation and the wisdom of understanding what transcends creation, God's mind, so to speak. In other words, the Torah, the wisdom of Torah, the wisdom of the inner dimensions of Torah in particular. Kabbalah, Chassidut. Okay, so these are the things that that the Zohar is talking about according to the commentaries. Now, we said originally that there was two ways of explaining the lower wisdom. One way of explaining it was that the development of modern science, and the other way of explaining it is the development of the understanding of how creation came to be. the truth is that these things are not necessarily at odds. These two explanations are not necessarily at odds with each other. In fact, they complement each other. They complement each other. Because through our scientific knowledge that we have today, we can start to understand things that are, we can use science as an analogy to be able to understand things that otherwise we wouldn't have understood clearly. I'll give you an example. Let's take the example of radio waves, or even a television signal, right? A radio signal or a television signal. Now, we know that the signal from the television station is being broadcast over a certain area, let's say to various towers. I'm not technically so familiar with exactly how it's done, but that's the assumption that I'm working on, is that they're broadcast to various towers, and from there, it's spread out to a certain area, right? And then other towers further on pick up the signal and then broadcast it to that area. In any event, whatever it is that we're talking about, whether it's radio waves or television waves or signals, they are there sort of in the atmosphere, but completely invisible. Those radio waves are invisible to us. That TV signal is invisible to us. However, if we have the right kind of instrument called a radio or a television, and the radio or the television set has the proper antenna, and it can tune into those radio waves using certain stations or channels on television, stations or channels, then when we switch the device on, we can actually hear those radio waves, and we can even see the television waves, the television signal. If we set our set to the right, our television set to the right station, to the right track, or whatever it's called, channel, we can actually see the movie being played, or whatever it happens to be, right? The game being played in Chicago tonight. If they're in Chicago, I don't know, but whatever. This is obvious to anybody who's used a television set or knows a little bit about television or about radio and so on and so forth. Now, we can use that as an analogy to understand a certain very difficult concept to understand in Hasidic terminology, and it's in fact from the Zohar. The Zohar talks about the godliness that is mamale kol almin, it fills the worlds. There's godliness that fills the worlds, but it's invisible. So, but hang on a second, if it fills the worlds, how can it be invisible? If it's invisible, how can it fill the worlds? What do we mean? Very simple. Take a radio signal, take a television signal, and that's exactly it works in exactly the same way. The radio signal, so to speak, I mean, we're using an analogy. The radio signal is all around, right? It's not generated by your radio, it's picked up by your radio. So in the future, just as our radios are able to pick up a signal which is coming perhaps from the other side of the country, right? It might be coming from, I'm in Chicago, it might be coming from New York, it might be coming from California, it could be coming from a different country, and it could be coming from New Zealand, right? Right the other end of the southern, near the South Pole or whatever, who knows, right? It could be coming right from the north, from Europe. I can still pick up the signal and almost instantaneously. And I can pick up the signal anywhere in the world if I have the right radio or the right television set and the antenna, and I've chosen the right station or the right channel. I can just plug into it, and there I can see in all its glory, or hear in all its richness, exactly what's going on, what's being broadcast. The same thing in the future, the Zohar is saying, when we come to the 7th millennium, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God, like water covers the seabed. In other words, just like we have radio waves everywhere now, and we can just tune into them and hear what's being said clearly, or tune into the picture on television, the channel, and get the picture clearly. So too in the future, it'll be exactly the same kind of thing. We'll be tuned in to the channel. We will tuned into that channel. But that's the channel of Mamalek Kol Almin. Mamalek Kol Almin, the light that fills the worlds, is only the lower wisdom. It's not the higher wisdom yet. It's a very high form of wisdom, yes. It's the inner dimension of creation, of all the worlds. So it can be an extremely, extremely lofty level of understanding. But yet it's only the outer Chokhmah. Those are the fountains that spring up from the earth. What about the windows of heaven? What are they? So we said before that is the wisdom of the inner dimension of Torah, and primarily, someone put the score here. Thank you, Dennis. I'm not actually a major baseball fan, since I never grew up with it, but cricket, old chap, is where I come from, you know. South Africa, big cricketers. Okay, so cricket and rugby, that's what I grew up with. So, okay, just to get back to the subject. The idea that we're talking about, therefore, of Sovev Kol Almin, the light that transcends the worlds, not the light that fills the worlds, that's Malek Kol Almin, but the light that transcends the world. In other words, the light that's beyond creation, the light that was hidden when God created the world. It says that when God created the world, let me just explain that verse. Right in the beginning of creation, it's a verse which I've explained here before, probably on more than one occasion, but right at the beginning of creation, it says like this, Vayomer Elokim, and God said, Yehi Or, there shall be light. Vayhi Or, and there was light. That's really the first creation, was the creation of light. Not luminaries, but light. Vayomer Elokim, God said, Yehi Or, Vayhi Or, there shall be light, and there was light. Now the Zohar points out, as well as various midrashim, midrashic literature is rabbinic literature, that explores the meaning of verses and so on. So the midrashim and the Zohar explain, and particularly the Zohar emphasizes, that the light that was said to be did not come into existence. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, there shall be light. Vayehi Or, but a different light came into existence. How do we know? Because all the other days of creation, it says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi, and God said, there shall be. And then it says, Vayehi, and so it was. Right? I'm sorry, it says, Vayehi Chen, and so it was. On the first day with the light, it doesn't say Vayehi Chen, and so it was. It says, Vayehi Or. There was a different kind of light that was actually manifested. The reason for that, explain our sages, is because God saw that that light was too lofty for this world to be able to use at that time, and therefore Gnazo, he hid it away. Where did he hide it? Says the Zohar, he hid it in the Torah. He took that light that he meant to be in creation. It wasn't a mistake. He knew what he was doing. He meant it to be in the future. But in order to be able to get to that light, we need the lower light. So the Vayehi Or, the light that actually was, that's the lower light. That's the light of the lower branch of Chokhmah. That's the light of the Chokhmah of creation. The light of the Chokhmah of Torah was hidden in the Torah. It was concealed in the Torah. And the Chachomim, the sages of the Torah, reveal that light to us to whatever extent we're able to pick it up. In other words, if we have the right antenna in the right place, in the right channel, we are able to pick up some of that wisdom. But that wisdom is wisdom that transcends the world. It's not the wisdom that fills creation, it's the wisdom that transcends creation. In other words, that's the wisdom of complete self-nullification, because the higher wisdom is the wisdom of non-being rather than the wisdom of being. Now, non-being does not mean, God forbid, a person doing himself any harm, and like one of these, the Jones cults or whatever it is, everybody killing themselves and think they're going to heaven on a, I don't know, some kind of mythical creature. No, that's not what it means. It means existing within the world and yet being completely nullified to godliness within that world, realizing that everything ultimately is God. And that's all that there is. And od milvado. That's all that there is. It's just God thinking this world or saying this world into existence. This world is created through speech. Vayomer Elokim Yehi, or God said there shall be light. God said let the earth bring forth herbs, and so on and so forth. So our world is the world of saying. It's the world of the world of verbal expressions, actually expressed verbally. Other worlds, higher worlds, are the worlds of thought, where the things are thought rather than expressed in a verbal sense. In other words, expressed in a lower sense. What one can express in words is much less than what one can express in thought. If you could tap into my thoughts, or I could tap into your thoughts, that would be a whole much higher level of understanding. The classic example that is given is the story about the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous Kabbalist from Tzfat in the 1500s, the father of modern Kabbalah. So the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria used to have a custom that he would go to sleep on in the afternoon of the Sabbath. On Shabbat afternoon, he would go to sleep for about an hour. And one day his disciple came into the room. He didn't realize that he was still sleeping. He came into the room, his disciple, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and he saw him sleeping. But he saw that his eyes were moving very rapidly. Even though he was sleeping, his eyes were moving rapidly. So afterwards he asked him, what were you dreaming about? And he said, what I dreamed about in that 1 hour would take me 80 years to explain to you. Because what you can see in a moment takes a tremendous amount of time to explain. You can only explain one word at a time. Right? So therefore explanation, like hearing, is linear. You can only hear one word at a time, whereas a picture you can see the whole thing. What will be in the future is the re'iyah of Chokhmah. The inner dimension of Chokhmah is to see things, to be able to see. Not just to hear it and understand it. As we said before, when in the 7th millennium the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, that knowledge of God is knowledge. It's knowledge. It's knowledge which is presented, probably presented in words, it's presented in a more of a linear fashion. The knowledge of creation is presented in a linear fashion. Whereas the knowledge which we get by vision, the vision of reality, the transcendent reality, the reality of God, that is all at once and what would take hundreds of years to explain, but we'll see it. And that's what began to happen, says the Zohar, in the 600th year of the 6th millennium. And yes, this applies to our lives. So how does it apply to life? What applies to life is as follows. There are two branches, essentially, of Kabbalah, which discuss these two things, the Chokhmah of Maaseh Breshit and the Chokhmah of Torah. Or, if you want to put it like this, the Chokhmah, which is the wisdom, which is the wisdom of creation, or it's about the world, it's about being. And the wisdom of the wisdom of Torah is the wisdom of the mitzvot. It's the wisdom of kavanot, of inner intentions, the wisdom of yichudim. It's the wisdom of the mitzvot, of the commandments which are given to us in the Torah. The inner dimension, the explanation, the kavanah that's the higher chokhmah. And both of these were revealed and started to be revealed from the time of again, about 170 something years ago, in the 6th millennium, the 600th year, says the Zohar, and will only develop more and more and more in there from then onwards. So we're moving more closer and closer towards that era when all these things will be revealed, and we'll be able to actually have a vision of the way things are. Essentially, we start off that process by making ourselves proper receivers, receivers that are tuned into the channel. And once we tune into the right channel and we're plugged into the electricity or whatever, then we can pick up, or we have our batteries fully loaded, then we can start to pick up the signal and develop our outer and inner beings in the proper way. More developed we become, the stronger the signal that we can receive, until eventually we come to the signal not only of an auditory signal, an audible signal, radio. Eventually we'll come to these sort of television signals, so to speak. We'll actually be able to see the thing for itself, even though it's something that's not necessary, that can't be seen because it transcends physical properties, but it'll be seen by the mind's eye. And that will be the 7th millennial is called the final Sabbath. It's like the Sabbath, but it's a Sabbath which lasts 1,000 years. It's not just it's not a Sabbath which lasts 1 day. It's 1,000 years. Okay, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.